Welcome back to my channel, everyone. This one is Fruit of Passion number 5. And in Fruit of Passion number 5, I'm going to emphasize the difference between my videos and everyone else's again. And that is, I am interested in the society that was a free society. And as I've stated before, the only one I'm aware of that's ever been that way is the Philistines. And in the Philistine society, everyone was free and equal. Now, as we continue on with Fruit of Passion, I have to give some credit to Kaylee and her website because I just ran across hers this last couple of weeks and I've seen some of the things that she's remarked about. She seems to be very knowledgeable on the things that she is saying. And so I'm relying on a lot of what she said to modify my position, to be able to add my feelings and thinkings in Fruit of Passion number 5. And one of the major things that I will be talking about that I hadn't planned to is the history of the Philistines. Now, I did know about Tepe before, and I theorized that with what I had seen that was done there, there's only one community on the face of the planet that I'm aware of that could have done it, and that would have been the Philistines. So I was aware the Philistines had done that, and now I have clarified my thinking a little bit, and I know what they did. They probably started rather small. As I said, the difference between Homo sapiens and all other animals are we are creators. Now, as a creator, that doesn't mean that we can put together a stick and a flint end and make a spear out of it. Other animals have that kind of ability. Creators are ones that can think, and they have the ability to invent things and come up with things that have never been used before. And as I've already mentioned, electricity is one of the big ones we've done, and the atom bomb is a big one we've done. But the first people that ever created that I'm aware of is the Philistines. And as I said before, the Philistines were the manufacturers and distributors of bronze during the entire Bronze Age. And the Bronze Age ended when Thera, the volcano of Thera, erupted and annihilated over 90% of the Philistines and all of their improvements and production facilities. Now, also that was destroyed along with that is the 125-foot tidal wave that took out the islands. And now we know for a fact that on the island of Crete, Arthur Evans excavated and found one of the manufacturing facilities, and it is known now as Knossos. And that manufacturing facility allowed a lot of bronze, a lot of olive oil, a lot of wine, and a lot of produce to be packaged and shipped across the whole Mediterranean. As I said, the Philistines were in existence for 8,000 years, and they basically were able to work with everyone because being a free and equal society, they negotiated with people until both people agreed that they were satisfied with the trading agreement. And now I know the very beginning of the Philistines. It's earlier than I thought, but what the Philistines started with, and I don't know at this point if the Amazon women had joined up with them, or it was this that attracted the Amazon women to them that allowed them to add the Amazon women into their society. And that was Tepe. And what they did at Tepe is they had a facility that all of the hunters and gatherers could come to on an annual, a semi-annual, or even a quarterly basis and pick up. One of the main things that would be for hunters and gatherers is flour, because being out and moving around to chase the game all the time, they would not have the ability to have that. But by being able to carry a sack of flour with them on their hunting and gathering expeditions, they could now continue to make bread and have bread along with the protein food that they were getting from the animals that were being killed. So the facility that we find on Tepe in Turkey is for the purpose of having a fixed location where all hunters and gatherers can come on a regular basis, whatever fits their needs, to come down, talk to the Philistine men. They, I'm sure, did not call themselves Philistine at this time. I don't know when they adopted that name, if they ever did, or if that is just a name that other people gave to them. But that's what I'm referring to them, because that's what the Bible refers to them. So one historical document that I'm looking at refers to these people as the Philistines. And the reason I know that that's the right people is when their island volcano erupted and terminated their production facilities of bronze. They were not able any longer to bring tin back from the distance it had to be transported in order to continue making bronze. Now, they were not short on bronze anyway, because as I've said before, they were on the delta of the Nile. And in the city of Avaris, it is already documented. They had many, many, many chariots. And the reason they had chariots is the Nile would be a grassy wetland, and it would be a lot easier just to ride in a chariot behind the horse than it would to be to try to walk, and less convenient to have to ride a horse through the mud. This way, the chariot was very useful in Avaris, and that's why they were able to have so many of them, because they had already manufactured bronze for 4,000 years, and now the trading empire had imploded. And at the disassembly of the trading empire, the bronze they had to figure out a use for themselves, and that's what they did. And eventually the Philistines did move up, as agreed with the Egyptians, to the 5 cities on the corner of the Egyptian territory. When the Egyptians had fought the Hittites and gained the property in the Levant, the Philistines agreed to relocate, abandon Avaris, and go to the 5 cities up in the Levant. And unfortunately for history, that's pretty much where everyone else thinks they started. They kind of know that they had Greek roots, but it wasn't even called Greece at the time. But they were on the island of Thera. That's where the Philistines moved their community after they had joined with the Amazon women, and they were in the process of manufacturing copper implements at the time. Early on, they helped the Egyptians build the pyramids by bringing trained elephants down to help drag the stones in place where they needed to be. And as I said on my other videos, when they had to go to the British Isles in order to mine the tin, one of the privileges the British got from that is they got Stonehenge, and being able to move large implements, rocks, like they were able to do, and how to get them to stand up and pile things on top of them. They had no problem with Stonehenge at all. But that is just part of the history I've already explained. I do have the chronology I put on Theory of Passion 4 about them starting in Tepe, and I have their beginning and their ending. They started in Tepe, and we lost track of them after they moved to South America, after the Roman Empire attacked Carthage. As I said before, the Philistines were not into fighting. They were a free society. They thought everyone should be equal. There should be superior and minority people in a society, and therefore they got out of Dodge. They went out of Carthage. They went in their boats that they had that were very good sea-going implements, and they were able to make it into South America. And the reason we know that is it's always troubled people why there are redheads in South America. And the recent DNA tests they've done shows clearly they are of European origin. So knowing their preferences, when I just know that the Romans came after them in Carthage, they weren't interested in seeing how many Romans they could kill. They thought the world was big enough, just get away from them and let them implode on their own. And Rome finally did implode after about another 1,000 years, 1,500 years. But that being said, we'll now move on with what I was talking about before. Now, one of the things that Kaylee enlightened me of is I had said before, there's one of two things how Homo sapiens could have been created. And that would have been a fluke of nature. And as I said, multiple flukes are unrealistic. They don't happen. I can't say they never have. As I said, God has a sense of humor, and probably one or two times in the 4.5 billion years the earth was here, an anomaly probably has happened. But you can't count on it. You can't even come close to counting on it. And now that I know that Homo sapiens have not been credited for being on the earth from 200,000 to 300,000 years, that doesn't give nature enough time to work. According to the new information I have, we showed up about 50,000 BC. And in 35,000 BC, 15,000 years later, none of the other, as I'm going to refer to them as humanoids, and they are people that have faces that are somewhat similar to the way that Homo sapiens look like, and they're more of a halfway mark in the scale between us and apes. But that being said, doesn't mean that they came from apes or that we came from apes. But I do know that, as I said before, opinions are like snowflakes. And I know that Kaylee has clearly the attitude that everything evolved. Well, I think now there's over a 90% chance that we've been given a message by the intelligent community of the universe. And we should have got that message when the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still was played. And we know that was the writers in Hollywood that made up that story. But they came up with the idea one Homo sapien should never kill another Homo sapien. Now we have to enlarge that. And the new theory has to be one intelligent life form should never, ever terminate the life of another intelligent life form. As we get out in space, we may meet the people that created us, and we may go to planets that don't have intelligent life forms, and we'll do some of our own gene splicing at the time. And if we did as good a job as they did with us, and that is creating enough individuals, I realize now there was less than a half a dozen different humanoids on the planet when they came at 50,000 BC. And so all they had to do was make around 8 or 10 with each community. And that would be around 50 Homo sapiens. So if nature took off a few of them by disease or accident or other ways, there would still be enough of them to start populating the earth. And that was their intention when they created us. So they created us as a different being. That's why our DNA does not match with any of the others. And that is why when we look at the humanoids here, we will find from every Homo sapien in the world, one of those 6 humanoids have a small part of their DNA. That's how they created us, so we could interbreed with them. And the reason they disappeared off the face of the earth, when they gave us the sex drive that the DNA was supposed to do, they ramped it up a little bit so that we would impregnate all of the humanoid females. When we turned 18 and that little girl turned 14, she got impregnated by a Homo sapien. So what happened is within 15,000 years, since they weren't reproducing at all, after 15,000 years, we were the only ones still on the planet. And from that time on, we have continued to grow, and there's quite a few of us on the planet today. But that being said, I'm going to get back now to the Bible and talk about Moses. I pretty well have covered Moses and what he did, and the things that I think are reality, and the things that I think Moses embellished upon, because he had the history when he grew up in Egypt. And I also realize now that I think Moses, even though he had a monistic idea about religion, he also favored people being free. He did have a history when he was studying and growing up in the palace of Egypt, and he probably did conclude that a free nation is more productive and more beneficial to the world than a slave society. And the reason I think that is he did create the Levites to be the rulers. But after the Levites basically had continued on, their prophets became the advisors to the people of the earth. But unfortunately, the Hebrew community demanded a king. When the Hebrew community, the Israelites now that had formed the nation, had split up the land in the Levant and had a nation. Now, this nation they have called as many as 12 different tribes. That means at least 12 different societies were spread out among the hills, tending flocks. Now, we don't find a lot of archaeology evidence about them because they lived in tents. After David had captured Jerusalem, the Israelites now branched out into farming and started settling down and occupying some of the towns of the previous societies. But at that time, the Philistines were already ingrained in their cities, and so they did have a little conflict when the Israelites tried to expand. But through the history of the Bible, I will talk about a little bit of the time of having the king, because when Saul came in, exactly what Samuel told them would happen is exactly what happened. They realized having a king made the king special, but did not necessarily help everyone else. And within 2 kings, by the time King Solomon had died, 10 northern tribes wanted a little bit of break from the burden that had been placed. All slave societies have a reason why we're better than you. All slave societies are insiders and outsiders, and that is what caused the murder and mayhem years. Did have King Saul. There's not a lot to say about him. He did the best he could. King David, I think a lot that was written about him was embellished, because you have to remember King David was friends with the Philistines for 2 years or more, as King Saul was trying to find him and kill him because he thought David was going to take over the kingship of the Israelites, and his son would not be able to have a job that he wanted him to have. Now, unfortunately, I said God has a sense of humor, and when Saul was taken out, his son was taken out as well. David was good friends with him by then, but that did leave the door wide open, and eventually David did take over the kingdom, and now the Jews became the dominant people in the society. And by the time it got around to writing the Bible, the writers already knew the history, that in the contest that was between the factions, that the Jews were going to win. But unfortunately, when, as I had said many times before, I am a Christian, when the Jewish boy grew up thinking that God had told him, I want you to be the Jewish Messiah, he tried to communicate to the Jews that your temple is not going to last. And he said many things to warn them that the temple would be destroyed. And of course, through history, now that we've lived it, we know in 70 AD, the temple was destroyed. Judaism, basically another 50 years later, were prohibited from the Romans to even occupying the land. Now, one of the benefits was that primarily it was the Jews that were prohibited, because some of the northern tribes that were called Sumerians by this time, which were probably some very DNA proven people of the original Israeli community, were what they now refer to themselves as the Sumerians. And they continued to occupy the land all the time that the Jews were prohibited from being on the property. But when England gave it back to the Jews after the Second World War, they're now coming to terms with the history and trying to adjust their society to accommodate people more like the accommodation the Philistines have done throughout their entire history. Now, that being said, I'm probably going to have to terminate this Fruit of Passion number 5, because I only want these to go about 20 minutes. I don't want them to go beyond 25 minutes. So I'll have to say goodbye for now. I thank you all for coming. Please continue to come and subscribe. So for now, goodbye.